Right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Unstuff America. I'm super excited about our guest today. We have Gerald Torres, who's a professor of environmental law at Cornell University and an environmental activist. He's the board chair of the Earth Day Network, which, and we'll talk about this more as we go on, is the largest non-religious holiday in the world, which blows my mind. And he's also a trustee of the Natural Resources Defense Council. So Gerald, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm pleased to be here myself. It was exciting to meet you, so I'm happy to talk.
Excellent. That's great. So those are your credentials. I mean, you have a substantial and sizable resume, and at the same time, tell us a little bit about yourself, your work as a law professor, as an environmental activist, and what's your home life like, so we get a picture of both personal and professional as it relates to stuff, physical stuff, and then the ephemeral stuff.
Well, it's in some ways I was a little concerned because one way, in fact, that I have not unstuffed is I have two homes. Right? I have one in Austin, Texas, and one here in Ithaca, New York. Although the apartment here in New York is much smaller, and we've committed to having a zero waste or as close to zero waste household as we can, which means we're recycling and composting, and it's a constant education. I luckily I convinced my roommates to invest in a composter, so it's out on our deck. Even though we're in an apartment, we have a composter out on our deck, and we try to make that happen. Of course, saying that in the face of having two homes does make it a little dicey, but in any event, that's what it is, and so I try to take the things that I teach, the things that I've learned, and actualize them in my daily life. I mean, one of the things that the NRDC, the Natural Resource Defense Council, has produced is a little book on zero waste, the Zero Waste Kitchen. It's called.
Oh, awesome!
That's prominently displayed in the kitchen, and I like to point it out to people who come over to eat and come over to visit, and so it starts conversations. They can start to think about how they can reduce waste by not producing it. Right.
Right. Oh,
the other thing I've been interested in is how you reduce inputs so that you have less waste to worry about at the back end. Right.
Right.
So that's what I do. I drive more than I should, I think. Although I take the bus as often as I can, so I try to reduce impacts that way as well. So
cool. And Cornell,
Cornell,
where you are, it's a bike-friendly city. I mean, can you get around on a bike?
Well, you can. Although I have to say, depending where in the city you start from, the challenge might be more substantial than others because it's quite hilly.
Aha.
But that just reinforces your commitment to health.
Excellent. So,
rationalization.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said, at least that's the rationalization for sweating up those hills.
There you go. Is your wife with you in both places?
No, she's in Austin, so I commute back and forth periodically.
Got it.
I'm actually heading there this weekend. And she runs basically a zero waste household down there, so that's good.
That is awesome.
And my daughter's up here with me because she's in school up here.
Oh,
so
nice.
And my son's in New York, so I'm up here in the Northeast, and I get to see them, and so it's a good thing.
Good. Your folks, are they alive?
Well, my mother is a vital 93.
Awesome.
I know this because I had a birthday recently, and she called. And I thought, of course, that she was calling to wish me a happy birthday. Instead, she says, Gerald, I just wanted to call to tell you, you're eligible for this senior citizens discount now. Don't waste them.
Excellent.
So, yes, she's still making jokes at 93, at my expense, I will say. But I think what's kept her healthy is that she never learned to drive.
Wow.
So even though she lives in Southern California, she walks everywhere.
Wow.
Which is, I'm sure that's contributed to her longevity, although her mother lived to be 98 and her grandfather lived to be 105. So she's kind of maybe starting with a genetic advantage,
yes.
which I hope that I inherited to be part of. My father, unfortunately, passed away about 25 years ago. He was 64. Died of cancer. I'm persuaded that it's environmentally linked. He was a steel worker, and so was assaulted by the processes of making steel. But everyone else in my family, I think, is healthy. I have 7 brothers and sisters, and so big family. And my mother is, like I said, is healthy, vital, sense of humor intact.
Perfect. Now, what about her stuff? Does she have a lot of stuff, or is she?
She doesn't. She lives in the same 2-bedroom home that I grew up in Southern California. The thing that she's been doing, and I think this is actually quite clever, is she's been unloading the stuff that she has, because as she's rightly points out, I'm not going to live forever.
Right.
I'm going to give away the stuff I have now, clean out the closets. You want it, you come get it. I'm getting rid of it. If you don't take it, it's going to get thrown away or recycled or donated. She said, and I don't want you fighting after I'm gone, because it'll all be given away by then. So it's a
well for mom.
Yeah, awesome. She's got. I think if any sense about that I picked up, I think I picked up from her, and she does it completely unsentimentally. This is it's about stuff. It's not about who she is or her relationships. It's about the stuff.
That is great.
Which is great. So I hope I can be that sensible. And it was reinforced the other day just because a friend of mine lost his home in those California fires.
Oh gosh.
His family was completely fine, but their house was vaporized, and he said, he had to take a deep breath and remind himself that it is just stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
no, I teach in California a fair amount, and because of the extreme weather things that have happened there, because I have not been actually down to the Gulf Coast. I haven't taught down there, but in California, often at an event, I will meet people who will say, mudslide, flood, fire happened. Was devastating in the moment, and it was the most liberating thing that I've ever experienced, because all of those decisions that I hadn't made in real time were made for me instantly. And on the other side of it, I've never gone back to that degree of accumulation. I mean, it could be that the people that I'm talking to are all, they've all had that switch, but there could be people possibly that had that kind of devastation occur and then started grabbing and bringing things in without a lot of awareness to the choices that they were making. But the people that I've all talked to have really taken it as an opportunity to make the kind of shift that they might not have been able to manage emotionally or psychologically independently of climate, but because of something horrible happening, they took it as an opportunity rather than as a disappointment. Right.
No, and I think that's both important. Psychologically, that's a really good place to be, right? Because you can't recreate the stuff, and so the question is what stuff did I really need? Right. What stuff to remake my life? What stuff do I really need? And those are having that decision taken away from you. I mean, it sounds harsh, but I take your point. It's okay now. Now the slate's been erased. I can start drawing again or writing on the slate as I need to. And that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's also because it is Mother Nature and not the government or the mortgage company. I mean, it didn't happen from a person. It happened from a force of nature far beyond your control. That some of the story that might be stuck to the devastation it's a little easier to be sanguine about it because it wasn't another person acting against you.
Right. And there's also kind of a level of thanks that you survived.
Yes.
A major traumatic event like that, which is, and I completely agree with you. It's not man-made. It's not human-made, right? It's the forces that are larger than us. And one of the things that we need to remind ourselves is there are forces larger than us. And too often we get locked up in our own ideas that we can do too much or control too much. Yeah. And I think it's good to be reminded of that.
Yep. Thank you. Uh, so on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the least organized, 10 being the most organized, where would you put yourself?
I'd say 5 or 6. I mean, I still, but the main source of disorganization for me, I mean, has come keeping schedules clean.
Uh-huh.
I allow myself to get overcommitted, which then leads me to have to shift things around. And I think that it's a source of psychological stress more than anything. The other thing I have to say, I collect books.
Uh-huh.
It's maybe an occupational hazard,
right? Professor.
But and my bookshelves could stand to be organized.
Uh-huh. Can you find stuff when you're looking for it?
I mostly can find stuff, but if I send someone to my bookshelf to get a book, I've got to go get it because they're never going to find it, right? And
got it.
That's a kind of disorganization. The other thing I've never been particularly good at, I have to say, is keeping really meticulous files. And I have a very good assistant here who now completely controls my calendar. So if she doesn't schedule it, it doesn't get scheduled.
Right.
And I use her as a basic, because I know I knew that I needed someone as a doorkeeper because I was incapable of doing that. And but she's also started to attack my files with some vigor.
Excellent.
And she's good because she wants me to be more organized, wants me to be more productive, and I think that's fabulous.
Awesome.
So I've help, but I'm not. I would say left to my own devices, I'm a 6 sliding down to a 4.
Got it. All right. Can you think of the last thing other than food or consumables that you purchased?
I hate to admit it, an amplifier. I'm a musician. And,
what do you play?
I play harmonica, I play blues. And so the last thing I got was a microphone, not a microphone, an amplifier for my harmonica. Now, I already owned an amplifier, so I didn't actually need a new one.
What was the story that you told yourself that allowed you to go buy it?
The one I play through normally is a big vintage Fender bassman. Weighs, it's like you could use it to anchor a boat.
Right.
So I wanted a smaller one that I could carry around to gigs more easily. That's the story I told myself.
Right. Will you let the old Fender go or no?
Ooh, probably not.
Right.
Probably not. I will bequeath it because it is a vintage piece of equipment. And if I found a young player who was really good and I became friends with, I might give it away.
All right. I'm going to plant that seed and just see what we can do to pour some water on that and nurture that so that you can, just like your mom, right?
Yep.
That is not you and it's not your music. And some young musician would benefit from it. So I'm just going to plant that seed and leave it up.
Exactly. No, and thank you for planting it because I mean, the reality is if I start playing through this new amplifier,
you're never going to use that.
I'm never going to go back to that one again, right? And it's a beast. I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, if you were out on the road with Led Zeppelin and you needed to create a stack of them, then by all means. But otherwise, now it just becomes an albatross. Exactly.
So that's the one thing. I justified the new one just because it is portable. Pick it up. Right?
I support you in that. I mean, I have a laptop that's my computer. I don't have a desktop and a laptop. I just have that. And I've avoided buying an iPad. Everybody's like, oh, do you have an iPad? No, I don't have an iPad. I don't need a tablet. I have a laptop computer. I need one device and it syncs to everything. And that is enough. And the old machines become part of the team. So I'm gesturing behind me because they often sit at that dining room table. And my machines get recycled in the business and then they get recycled out into the universe. So
right. Well, I was going to say one thing that I have done around the law school is to have them set up battery recycling because people go through batteries like crazy and you can't throw them in the trash, without fouling the trash. So you can set up a battery recycling, but I also just have a laptop. And once they became powerful enough to do everything a desktop could do, I mean, why do you need to?
Right. No, I agree. I'm,
you know.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
So it sounds like at work, organization and simplifying. I mean, you have this killer support person who's helping, but that um, you are mindful about making choices, looking for ways to simplify, even
Right.
if your human nature still has some tugs on it. That it's what I talk about a lot around. There's a pivot point, and this choice is either going to complicate your life or your work, or it's going to simplify it. And if you think it all the way through to the natural progression and extension, you will get to a place where you will have clarity. Oh yeah, short term seems smart. Long term, I'm going to have 9 things that have to be dismantled as a result of this one choice. And I find that certainly a lot of the people that I work with as clients or students, in the short term, it seems like, oh, this new Giga is the answer to all of my challenges, and it's going to revolutionize my process.
Right.
But in fact, now it requires 45 minutes 9 times in the next 2 weeks of implementation time that you did not budget for when you just thought, I just need my credit card and 15 minutes at Best Buy, and this is going to change my life.
Right. Exactly. No, that's exactly right. One of the things I'm actually thinking of getting rid of are tools that I bought years ago when I wanted to do woodworking.
Uh-huh.
And now I don't have a place to I don't have a workshop. I have these tools, and my feeling is I need to get rid of them. Right. That I'm not going to. I have this fantasy that I'd like to get back to it, but I'm letting go of it and recognize that it is a fantasy.
Yeah.
And that's an important step, I think, actually, is recognizing things that on some level are kind of tied to your identity, right? But then asking yourself, what's really there, right? What's really there, and what can I let go of? One of the I was an exchange student in Japan when I was in high school, and so one thing I've always carried with me is that aesthetic.
Uh-huh.
And in some ways, that's the way I would like to live. If you could, those clean lines, those clean spaces, you slept on a mat on the floor.
Yep.
And it's always stuck with me. I have not been able to achieve that, but that's, and part of it is the way Americans live.
Right.
But that's what I try to do. I have done one thing, which is kind of interesting, I think, is rather than buy all new furniture when I had these 2 homes, I did buy new furniture, but I bought cardboard furniture.
Wow.
And there's a fellow kid that manufactures this stuff, and it's fabulous stuff. It's beautiful. It looks like origami made into furniture, right? And when I need to recycle them, I'll be able to recycle them, right? And I won't have a ton of junk to cart around.
Right. That is
I feel good about that anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you afterwards. We're going to follow up and get the link to this cardboard furniture, and also to the NRDC website where folks can get that zero waste
kitchen. Great.
Exactly, because I'd like to be able to share those with the listeners as well.
Oh, those are great resources. Right?
Yeah. All right. Well, so tell us about your work with Earth Day, the Earth Day Network, and what's going on there. Because I think certainly, I mean, when you and I met, I was struck by that fact that Earth Day is the largest non-religious holiday in the world, and I think it's humbling and tremendously inspiring that something that started, that has hippie overtones and that sense of California crazy, as actually, I mean, it's morphed into something that left, right, north, south, black, white, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. It's about the earth, and it supersedes all things. So
no,
absolutely.
I mean, one of the things about working with Earth Day that's been so amazing to me is Kathleen Rogers, who's the executive director, runs a very small shop, permanent shop. But out of that, she enlists volunteers and creates linkages across the world And she's very persuasive, so I'm going to give her credit,
Sure.
right? But it's also the idea that is so important. I just got back from Sweden, where they're planning Earth Day in Sweden, Earth Day, the 20th anniversary of 50th anniversary of Earth Day in Stockholm. And I've been talking to friends there. But one thing I noticed in Sweden, which I'm bringing back here, is they had curbside composting.
Wow.
But then the next thing I noticed was they had biofuel buses. So they take the compost that they collect at the curbside, convert it to fuel, and they run their mass transit on biofuel.
Wild.
So they've closed that loop. And I'm thinking, this is I went there to push and promote Earth Day, and now I can bring this idea back. And it's one way we share ideas across. The other thing that Earth Day does that's so important, it seems to me, is exactly what you said. It's not a left-right divide. It's not corporate, non-corporate. It's that we can all cooperate to make this planet better. I'm a teacher, you're a teacher, and one of the things I'd like to teach a class sometime called memory. I'd like to teach an environmental class called memory, just to remind the students now who are living in the world we live now, what it was like before Earth Day.
Right.
Before people made the commitment to address environmental issues. I mean, I remember growing up in Southern California and looking out my kitchen window and not being able to see the 8,000-foot mountains, not 20 miles away because of the smog.
Right.
Now you can see them every day.
Yeah.
That's important to remember. And that's, making do with less in some ways, right? But it's also being more efficient about how we use things. And that's, when I think about Unstuff It, part of it is about efficiency that we can achieve in our daily lives. And I think that's really important. Let me tell you about a group I'm working with here.
Please.
I think it's a brilliant idea. It's called Dish Truck. Okay. So what does Dish Truck do? What Dish Truck does, it says, look, there are a lot of Ithaca, like a lot of college towns, has a lot of festivals. Mm-hmm. If you go to any festival, you see trash being created by vendors, right? Or street food trucks. You see trash created by. So it's an organization that is committing to get the festivals to use durable dishes, which it provides. It then collects, washes them, and they use them around. So that instead of disposable dishes at every food vendor, you have durable dishes, durable flatware that is collected. The food's composted. This Dish Truck does all of that, and they're trying to eliminate waste at the farmers market, at festivals, at street vendors, and that alone is a very simple idea.
Right.
Which is, if you think of the plate as providing a service.
Yes.
Right. Not just serving a function, but it's actual service.
Yep.
And you can actually do it at a cost that's competitive with disposables, right. Especially because the idea, there was this market for compostable disposables. It turns out, at least our composting waste specialist here in Tompkins County, it refuses to take them anymore because they're not truly compostable.
Right.
Right. And so.
Yeah. I know. I mean, they sell them as compostable, and the truth is, I mean, it doesn't get hot enough to actually break them down, and that's. I mean, you hear it, and it's great marketing in that sense that okay, so this is made out of corn, and it's not plastic per se,
right.
But you can't throw it in your pile of greens and browns in your backyard, and right. Anything's gonna happen to it. That plate's gonna be there, that cup's gonna be there, that fork's gonna be there in 50 years. It is not
right.
gonna magically turn into earthworm food.
Exactly. And so it seems like it's a very simple project in some ways, very simple idea, but its impact can be tremendous.
Yes.
And it actually then eliminates all of that waste. And you want to talk about unstuffing it. It also provides work, right? Because this will be maybe not glamorous work, but good and honest work.
Yes.
And that actually provides a real service to people in the community.
Yeah, well, and probably if you wanted to attend the festival, a way to get there would be to work with with what's it called? What truck? What's it called?
Dish truck.
Dish truck. I mean, if you're working dish truck and you're working at the local folk music festival, it's a great way to get in there. You're managing the cutlery, and you're also getting to listen to some music.
Well, they did a pilot last year at the Grassroots Festival here in Ithaca, which is one of the biggest ones. And that's exactly what they did. They said, you work for Dish Truck, you can have admission to the festival.
Awesome.
Right? And a lot of people wanted to come hear the music, so they were willing to wash dishes and collect dishes and
right.
eliminate trash, which is it's all a good thing. It's all a good thing.
Well, building off of that, so let's talk about the macro of Unstuff America. When I first invited you and we first started talking about coming on the podcast, what did that conjure up for you? What do you think of when you hear Unstuff America?
Well, what I heard about, or what I thought about, when I first heard the idea of Unstuff America, I mean two images, right? Uh-huh. One is kind of an overstuffed thing that you want to just pull stuff out of, right?
Yes.
The other thing is to recognize that we all need stuff, right? But being conscious about the things you use is what's really critical. So when we started talking about Unstuff America, what I thought about was how can we be more conscious about the things we bring into our lives, the physical things we bring into our lives, knowing that we're either creating waste because we're going to dispose of them, or we're creating clutter in our lives that we have to somehow manage.
Yes.
And what I've discovered, and I think one of the reasons I like that spare aesthetic, is that it's psychologically more relaxing. Mm-hmm. And the more junk you have, actually, the tenser you feel, I think.
No.
And so, the effort is to simplify, not so you can live like a monk necessarily, but so that you can live better.
Yes.
And that's the way I interpreted it.
Excellent. Thank you. I would completely agree. I think that I'm really clear that you don't need to be a Zen Buddhist monk to have a simple life. But I do believe, and I talk about this all the time, that we need to acknowledge that we are the stewards of the objects that we bring into our lives. And if you're not willing to do cradle to grave, then you really have to consider before it crosses the threshold what's going to happen with it. Because you can't just buy it because it's yummy and delicious when you see it on the shelf and then think, well, now I'm just going to throw it in the garbage because I'm done with it. Because just because it's out of sight of you doesn't mean that it's out of sight of everybody, and it doesn't mean that there's not impact behind it. So you want a new printer, I get that. What are you going to do with the old printer, and what are you going to do with the new one when it fails too? Is there a way, can you share a printer with your neighbor? Can you share a printer with the department? It doesn't matter what the solution is, but have you thought it all the way through, that who's signing on to be the proper steward, and have you considered all of the implications of that stewardship, right? I mean, you get a companion animal, you're in a relationship with another person, whether it's a child, a parent, a lover, whatever, a roommate, you're assuming a certain degree of responsibility for those relationships. It's the same thing with the inanimate object. And unlike those living relationships, you're partnered with something that has no action of its own. It is completely passive and waiting for you to interact with it. So the printer is not going to dismantle itself. The dog might leave in the middle of the night and go out into the woods and disappear because it's been programmed over centuries to know that at that moment of critical, if you're not taking it to the vet to assist it in leaving, it's going to take care of it on its own, right? I mean, it's been programmed to do that. The printer does not have artificial intelligence yet to say, I now need to move to a recycle facility where I'm going to be dismantled appropriately and turned back into something useful.
No, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, the way you put it is exactly right. That when you get something, right, you are assuming stewardship of it, right? That or somebody else put it, there's no away when you say throw it away. There's no away because it's somebody else's place that you're putting this, right?
Right.
And so once you I guess get conscious of that idea, it does make you think more carefully about what you get. For instance, when I moved households, I needed kitchen stuff. I could have gone out and bought all new kitchen stuff, but I asked friends, what are you using that
Right.
you could, and it turns out I've outfitted my entire kitchen.
Of course.
It's not, I would say it's not perfectly outfitted, but it's pretty darn good.
Sure.
And it's all done by people getting rid of things that they had accumulated that they really didn't need anymore. Right. And that's, so I feel like it's a way of being conscious of the thing, right? And I'm glad you brought up the idea of companion animals or pets or whatever. You would think how badly you would think about someone who brought a dog home and then just thought they could dispose of it.
Right.
I mean, it's a horrible idea, right? A horrible thought, right? Yet we think nothing of bringing a disposable object that we then or recyclable object that we now have to get rid of.
Right.
And by non-recyclable means, we've got to think of a secondary use for it, or it becomes garbage.
Yeah. I love the idea of there is no away, that one person's away is another person's home, and that
Right.
You can't just pack up all your crap when you're done with it and drop it on my doorstep, and now
Right.
it's like, surprise.
Exactly.
So
Right.
I deal with it.
Next time somebody says, "I'll just throw it away," you can remember there is no away.
Exactly. There is no away. Awesome. So let me ask you, when for people who aren't as active and engaged as you are, who are intimidated by the idea of advocating and participating outside of their home, right? What's in a thumbnail journey, your journey into activism, and again, not with a capital A, but just the idea of beyond your doorstep, having an impact and participating in a way of shaping your local community to reflect not only your individual values, but what you would consider to be the community's values. You moved to the neighborhood, you moved into the town, you thought you were moving there because there were shared values about quality of life, education, healthcare, whatever it was. And you thought, okay, these are my people, or they're about to become my people. We're all gonna be our people together. So
Right.
How do you participate in that way that feels like a natural extension of yourself, that also doesn't feel like you're stringing yourself out in a way that costs too much at the beginning?
Right. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, let me. There's something we started at Earth Day.
Yep.
The network that's really neat, because it's called a billion acts of green.
Wow.
And so when you do something that's environmentally friendly, recycle, you can register that act at the website. And what that means is when we talk to world leaders, we can say, look, we have 2 billion people now who've done something for the environment. They want you to do something for the environment. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to be big.
Right.
So I would urge people to start small, especially if they haven't been activists. Start small, do it locally, and be brave. Be brave. Take mass transit even if you're not used to it. Right? Join a car share. One of the things when I moved to Ithaca is there's an organization called Ithaca Car Share, and I didn't have a car, and I thought I don't actually need a car every day. I can take mass transit, and when I actually need a vehicle, I can get on my computer, right, and reserve it and use it for the hours that I need it, and then return it. And I know not everyone can do that.
Sure.
But there are little things you can do. Recycle. Right, you want your community to be better. Buy recyclable things, right?
Yep.
Compost, right? Urge. One thing I wanted to do in the apartment building I lived in, I've moved to a different apartment building, was to start community composting in the apartment building. And so you can do little things like that. And you don't have to be a big A activist,
right?
But you have to be conscious.
Yes.
And so I'd say start local, be conscious. Start small, be brave.
Yep.
And that's what I tell people.
That's
and bravery, bravery's I use it on purpose because that means pushing just one step beyond your comfort zone. Not a mile, just one step.
Yeah. No, it's micro-philanthropy. I talk about that with friends often, the idea that you don't need to write a check for $1 million.
Exactly.
sometimes 50 cents is going to make the difference, or opening the door for somebody. It
Right.
doesn't, the scale of it is not what's important. It's the gesture and it's the movement forward.
Well, it's funny because among my musician friends, one of the things that I learned a couple of things, but one really important thing is I was talking to a fellow who's a very good musician, and we were talking about technique, and he said, look, it's not about technique. He said, what's most important is when you get up there to play is setting the right intention and playing with that intention. And if you do that, you're going to get to the place you want to get to. And I think that's right. I think so. Setting the intention is an important step. And it doesn't have to, we're not all going to change the world.
Right.
Right. But the world's not going to change if we don't do something. Right. And it doesn't have to be major. It can be small. Right. But that something is important. Like the idea today of, there's no way. That's a little thing that you start to share with people. And that little bit becomes part of their consciousness as they think about, do I really need to buy this?
Yeah. Oh, I'll be using it all the time now. Every time I'm out in the public teaching and people, I tell them always, landfill is the last resort. There are plenty of places something can go before it ends up in the trash. So stop using that language that says we're throwing it away. I mean, we're letting it go.
We're letting it go.
Not throwing it away. There is, now I can say there is no way to throw it.
Right.
Which it just buttons it up really. It's a perfect little button on that saying, but I tell them all the time, that's not what we're talking about here. We're releasing things that we no longer need. Your trash is somebody's treasure. Somebody needs it. And if there is nothing left, if there's no use that can be squeezed out of it, then we need to dismantle it in the most appropriate, responsible way possible, and be smart the next time we want to grab it. Oh, right, last time this was a complicated dismantling process. I need to find an alternative because I don't want to be that busy to make this go away, not away.
Right. Well, the one thing I've started doing here is because you can at the local co-op, is buy in bulk.
Uh-huh.
So I take my jars, not everybody can do this, right?
Right.
But, I'm not buying a bag for the flour that I need, or the oats I need, or the sugar, or the nuts, or whatever, right? I can take my own containers, and you'd be surprised how many jars you can accumulate just in your daily life if you wash them out, dry them, use them to, fill them up with stuff you need. Dishwasher detergent, you can, they sell that in bulk too. You can get that stuff, and you can create less waste, in your daily life just by thinking about it a little bit. Yeah, and it's a little more work. I concede.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little more.
But I think again, the benefits not only to yourself, to the environment, to the community it's that sense of participating, that it's okay for it to cost you a little bit more in time or in money if the impact is geometric. It's not a simple math equation. Your 50 cents or your extra 50 feet is going to have geometric impact on the entire community. And if everybody would just take 50 steps more, imagine the impact. So you can dismantle that sense of like, oh, well, I don't want to do it because nobody, like, I don't want to be the first, or I don't want to be the person who, well, nobody else is, so why should I be in position? It's like, it has to start somewhere, and why not you?
Exactly. And that point that you just made, right, is the genius behind Earth Day. Right? Because what Earth Day, it was getting people just for one day initially to say, this matters. This matters to me, right? And that was all they had to say that first day, was the environment matters to me. Caring for the environment matters to me. And look what it's become in 47 years, right? The largest non-religious holiday in the world. That people, that from that first Earth Day, getting people to make that commitment. And that commitment, in fact, has yielded legislation. It's yielded, all the changes that we now take for granted in our lives. That's made our environment, certainly in the United States, better. I mean, the idea that most Americans, not all Americans yet, but most Americans can turn on the tap and get good, potable drinking water. Well, that's close to a miracle.
Yes.
And I want people to appreciate that that's close to a miracle, right? But that didn't come from, design necessarily. The design came out of the impetus that everybody said, you ought to be able to turn on your tap and get potable drinking water.
Right.
Right. We ought not worry about whether the air we breathe is going to give us cancer.
Right.
Right. But it all started with those people just making that commitment way back when, 47 years ago, saying this matters. And that's a small step, right? That's exactly the point you made. Exactly the point you made, right? And when you link hands together, it makes it even more powerful.
Yeah. Well, that I can't think of a better way to wrap up this conversation. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but I'm just delighted to have had you here sharing your wisdom and thoughtfulness with the listeners. If folks want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about Earth Day, where do they need to go to get that information?
Well, they can go to earthday.org, which is the website. They can go to nrdc.org, which is the NRDC website. There's a publication button that they can push, and it'll list the publications that NRDC has produced.
Excellent.
The Zero Waste Kitchen they can get from NRDC directly, I believe.
Perfect.
They can order it. I would encourage people to go to the earthday.org website. Go to the Billion Acts of Green, and if they want to just make a point of, I bought in bulk today, or I recycled today, or I took the bus today, just to let other people know you're doing this.
Yeah.
And letting other people know you do it is, it's empowering in itself. And what you'll find when you do it, you're joining billions of people who are already doing this.
Yeah.
And what that does is that links your voice to every other voice that says, back to Earth Day, this matters.
Right. Oh, that is awesome. Thank you so much,
Thank
Joe,
you
for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking.
Oh, this has been great fun. I really appreciate it. And thank you for putting this podcast together and unleashing the idea of Unstuff America. That's a great idea.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Again, you can find information about Earth Day Network at earthday.org and NRDC, National Resources Defense Council, NRDC.org. Right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you back here again real soon. Thanks, everybody.
Well, I'll be listening to the podcast, so don't worry. All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.